Starting off this countdown, we have the married couple's parents. This story surrounds a couple named Stephen and Helen Lee. A couple of years ago, the pair got engaged when they learned something very freaky about their families. While going through family photos during their engagement party, they found photos of their parents together. Turns out that Stephen's father and Helen's mom had actually dated and were set to get married in Korea in the 1960s. But their parents' disapproved, so they didn't. Had they not disapproved, the couple would have never been born. Not only that, but what are the odds that they got together after their parents had already gotten together? Kinda awkward if you ask me. Moving on at number 9, we have the church fire. On March 1st of 1950 at 7:25 p.m., a church exploded in Beatrice, Nebraska. At 7:20, a choir practice had begun, except none of the 15 choir members were there. And it's lucky that they weren't, or else they would have perished in the fire. Turns out that all 15 members arrived late due to personal reasons. So they were nowhere near the church when it exploded. What are the odds that all 15 members were running late? This story could have ended in tragedy. Thankfully, it didn't. Moving on to number 8, we have the wedding vows. In 2007, Fred and Lynette Dubendorf were walking along a beach clearing up some litter when they found a message in a bottle. After they opened it, they found it contained the marriage vows of another couple. Upon closer inspection, they found that their marriage dates matched. The couple who created the vows in the bottle were married on August 18th of that year. The Dubendorfs were married August 18th of 1979. Both couples were also married on beaches. The Dubendorfs were in complete shock and actually reached out to the other couple. Thankfully, the couple left their address in the bottle. Both couples now believe that their marriages were meant to be, especially Matt and Melody, the couple that wrote the vows in a bottle, who had several failed marriages before finding each other. They were skeptical about getting married again, but this to them is a sign that it was meant to be. Moving on to number 7, we have Edgar Allan Poe. This is one of the freakiest coincidences I have ever read about. So in 1838, Edgar Allan Poe wrote his only complete novel. It was called The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket. The book was about Arthur Pym, who goes on a nautical adventure. He hops on a boat as a stowaway and hides out there. But while aboard the ship, a mutiny occurs and a number of crew members lose their life. There's only 4 members aboard the ship now. One of the men was named Richard Parker. They kept him alive to help them control the ship. However, they encountered a terrible storm and things went south. The remaining 4 people on board are struggling to find food. So Richard was like, let's draw straws. Whoever gets the shortest straw will be killed and the others can eat them. So they did as Richard said, and he ended up drawing the shortest straw and then was eaten by his crew members. Believe it or not, but 46 years after that book was published, this happened in real life. In May of 1884, 4 men were traveling from England to Australia when they found themselves fighting for their lives. The men decided to draw straws and see who they should eat. The cabin boy drew the smallest straw. What was the cabin boy's name? Richard Parker. The same name as the guy who got eaten in the book. What are the odds of that? Is Edgar Allan Poe a psychic, or did he write history, or both? Moving on to number 6, we have Redbox. This story comes from Matinee25 on Reddit. A couple of years ago, her and her friend went to Redbox to see if they could rent the movie Tron. For those of you who don't know what Redbox is, basically it's an American video rental company that has these little kiosks you can go to and pick what movie you want, and then you can rent it and you'll get the DVD. So they went there, but they found out that they didn't have Tron. So they were like, okay, screw it, let's just rent another movie. Well, when they opened up the DVD case, turns out that inside was the movie Tron. Someone had put it back in the wrong case. But what are the odds? Because that's the movie that they wanted to see in the first place. Like, out of all the DVDs they could have gotten, they got the one with the switched disc. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the lucky numbers. So this story comes from Yamaletef on Reddit. According to them, they were working as a call center operator when they asked the caller for her birthday. The caller said it was April 20th, which was the same birthday as the operator. When the next caller rang in, their birthday was April 27th, which was the same birthday as the operator's brothers. So at this point, the operator was like, okay, what is going on? And then the caller told her that maybe it's a sign and that she should go play the lottery with those dates. And that night, she went to the grocery store, played with those numbers, and ended up winning. It was only $380, but still, that's better than nothing. What are the odds that the winning numbers correlated to the caller's birthdays? In our fourth spot, we have the birthdays. According to a woman named Carrie Lee Simmons, her and her best friend share a number of eerie similarities. First, they both have the same birthdays. Not only that, but turns out that they were born in the same hospital, and their mothers shared the same recovery room. Keep in mind that their mothers were complete strangers. Then, 17 years later, the two connected and became best friends. When they found out that they were practically born beside each other, they completely freaked out. That's how you know that friendship is meant to be. In our third spot, we have The Sign. This next story is from Reddit user EricFP23. So, the day in which her grandfather died, her mother had been sitting in bed next to him, comforting him. Before he passed, she whispered to him, "Tell Richie I say hi." Richie was her ex-husband who had passed away a couple years earlier. A couple of days after her grandfather's passing, Erica and her mom were at Walgreens when all of a sudden a huge truck drove by with some writing written on the side of it. It read, "Richie says hi." I am speechless. Like, that's just goosebumps. And Erica and her mom were speechless too. It's either just a super eerie coincidence or Richie sent that message from the grave. Moving on to number 2, we have the taxi driver. I'm sorry, but this one is a little depressing compared to the other stories on today's list. In 1974, a man was riding his moped scooter in Bermuda when he was struck and killed by a taxi. 1 year later, his twin brother was riding the exact same scooter when he was struck and killed by a taxi as well. The taxi was driven by the exact same driver who took his brother's life. So not only did the twins die the exact same way, but they had been killed by the exact same person. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the life savior. When Su Weifang of China was 50 years old, he was outside near a river by his home when he saw a boy drowning. So he jumped in and saved his life. 30 years later, he rescued another boy from the river. This boy had slipped and fell into the river and didn't know how to swim. Once again, Weifang jumped in and saved this boy's life. Well, turns out that the two people he saved were related. They were father and son. 30 years ago, he saved the boy's father from drowning. Then, he saved the father's son from drowning in the same river. So they believe that this man is their guardian angel. All right,
coming in at number 10, we have Stephen Hawking's death day. Stephen Hawking was one of the most brilliant minds of our time and left a scientific legacy that humans will revere for centuries to come. It was definitely a sad day when he died on March 14th, 2018. Wait a minute. Isn't that 3.14? Aren't those the first 3 numbers of pi? Why, yes. Yes, it is. But wait, that's not all. Not only does Hawking's death day coincide with pi, it also lands on Albert Einstein's birthday and on the day that Galileo also met his end. I guess great minds think alike. Coming in at number 9, we have Mark Twain and Halley's Comet. They came in together, they must go out together. This was something Twain said before he died. Mark Twain was born on November 30th, 1835, which was the same year, and 2 weeks after Halley's Comet flew past. During his time on Earth, Twain was famous for such works as Tom Sawyer and The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, and many more. He was awesome. Twain was convinced next time the Halley Comet dropped by, that would be his time to go, and he was right. On April 21st, 1910, Mark Twain met his end, which was coincidentally the day after the comet passed by once again. Coming in at number 8, The Simpsons in general. One of the longest running TV shows in history, The Simpsons are notorious for somehow predicting outrageous events, including the president of the United States was going to be Donald Trump. If you watched the episode with Donald Trump as president today, you would probably have thought it was just another comedic, satirical episode of a TV show to do at the time. But the thing is, they wrote that sucker 19 years ago. How on earth did they guess that? With the show running for over 30 years, themes occurring in the show are eventually going to happen in real life, maybe. But this? They predicted a 3-eyed fish, a circus entertainer getting attacked mid-performance, even the Ebola outbreak. I think we can safely put down The Simpsons as one large coincidence, considering the amount they've had. They happen so often that the questions of whether they are psychic or actually secretly controlling events, I don't know, these are just things we need to know. Like right now. These kinds of coincidences just need an explanation. Coming in at number 7, Catherine Eddowes and Mary Kelly. Jack the Ripper. That's pretty much all I need to say to get all the cold case crime fanatics interested. Are you ready? This next coincidence is a lot darker. Catherine Eddowes was one of Jack the Ripper's victims, taken only an hour after Elizabeth Stride. But this is where things get creepier. That day, Eddowes was found passed out drunk on the street and was arrested. Once she was sober enough to go home, she ended up giving the police a fake name, Mary Kelly. That same night, Eddowes was murdered, and guess who would follow in her footsteps? A woman named Mary Jane Kelly. That's ridiculous. Like, that just makes me wonder whether it actually, I know they solved the crime, but that makes me wonder as to whether, I don't know, Jack the Ripper was actually in the police force. How could that happen? How can we explain that? That's just too wild. Coming in at number 6, we have Royce Burton. Are you ever right in the middle of telling a story when the very person you're talking about like walks into the room? There are two subtle reactions. One, pretend you are talking about them, depending on what you're talking about. Gossiping, like, just pretend. What? Oh, what's that? Oh, who's that? Oh, hey! That's what you do. And the second one, you just look at them and go, oh, speak of the devil. Royce Burton had the latter reaction, though it's kind of cooler, when the very stranger who saved his life strolled in right as he mentioned him. Royce used to be a Texas Ranger, and one night while patrolling the Rio Grande in 1940, he got lost and tried to climb up the cliff to find his way. As he was nearing the edge, he almost fell, but then the hand of a man named Joe, reached out and hoisted him up. The two men lost contact when they both joined the war, and 25 years later, Burton had become a teacher, and he was in the middle of the story when Joe strolled in. Not missing a beat, Burton said, I'll let Joe finish the story. And his whole class were like, what? These guys hadn't seen each other in 25 years, and apparently Joe had been looking for him, and the rest is the rest of the story you know. Coming in at number 5, you know when you meet that special someone and you just know you're meant to be? Some people are so lucky, and this couple got a physical sign that they were in the right place at the right time. Melody Kloska and Matt Burr were married on August 18th on the beautiful Wisconsin beach. A week later, they took their vows, placed them in a bottle, and watched them go on their merry way as they let them drift on Lake Michigan, only to be recovered by Lynette and Fred Dubendorf. To their delight and surprise, the wedding date matched theirs as they were married on August 18th, 1979, almost 28 years earlier. If that's not a sign of forever love, then I don't know what is. Coming in at number 4, speaking of signs, many people often look for the right signs when making a big decision or when looking for love. After going through a rough breakup, Esther Gracken wrote her name on several dollar bills and promised herself that she would only marry the man who brought one back to her. Wow, what did you know? A few years later, a man named Paul, dating Esther for a while, and he decided one day he's gonna ask her to be his girlfriend. That same day, as he was going to pay for his sandwich, he noticed that his dollar bill had Esther's name on it, written in pencil. Weird. He was just thinking about her. He decided to frame it and save it for her as a gift. When she got it, she gasped but didn't say anything until a few years later, because she didn't want to jinx it, when they were married. That was when she told him the story, and the two have lived happily ever since. Can't be explained, but it's pretty damn cute. Coming in at number 3, Parent Trap. So first off, consider the chances of actually conceiving twins. About 1 in 250, so that's already a cool thing. But then imagine you pull a parent trap and discover you have actually had a twin your entire life, but you were separated at birth, and then you find out that not only do you look identical, your lives are too. This is exactly what happened to two men when they were reunited at age 39. They were both named James, they both grew up to be police officers, and both their wives were named Linda. Each also had a son named James Allen and a dog named Toy. Then they both got divorced and both married a woman named Betty. What are the chances of that? More like one in a billion than 1 in 250. Coming in at number 2, we have Richard Parker and Edgar Allan Poe. Edgar Allan Poe, master of the macabre. This man's mind went to some pretty dark, albeit creative places. Some even say he predicted the future, which could be the only explanation for this coincidence. The narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket is one of his most terrifying, as it recounts the tale of sailors forced to eat a cabin boy named Richard Parker after being stranded on a boat after a shipwreck. People guffawed at Poe when he said that this was based off a true story, though there were none like it at the time. What is insanely creepy about the story is that 50 years later, the exact same event happened, mimicking the story in eerily close ways. The most ominous being that the boy the real sailors ate, his name was Richard Parker. And coming in at number 1, Violet Jessup. Luck and coincidence often go hand in hand, especially for Violet Jessup. They called the Titanic unsinkable, but I think they meant her. This woman survived not 1, not 2, but 3 shipwrecks, including the aforementioned Titanic. She was either really lucky or a bad omen or both. Probably both. She worked as a nurse and stewardess on the HMS Olympic when it was struck by the HMS Hawk. She was on board the HMHS Britannic when it was hit by a landmine, and the Titanic, and we all know that story. Though her lifeboat was almost taken down by the spinning propellers, Violet jumped out just in time and hit her head, but she survived, ending up living to age 83. How could one woman be so unlucky and lucky to survive 3 iconic shipwrecks? Must be a coincidence.
At number 10, a leading Nazi was on a last-minute vacation during the D-Day landings. A huge British wartime victory could have been very different if a German field marshal hadn't chosen that exact time to take his wife away. During the Normandy storm of 1944, Erwin Rommel, known as Desert Fox, decided to take his wife on a surprise trip for her birthday. He was a key strategist and a military tactician, and had he been in Normandy, things could have turned out very differently. The scary thing about this coincidence is how different the world could be right now if the Allies lost the battle. Coming into number 9, we have the sinking of the SMS Captain Trafalgar. Okay, so this is some mind-altering stuff, stick with me. The British Navy converted a cruise ship, the RMS Carmania, into a warship. They disguised this as an existing German passenger liner called the SMS Captain Trafalgar. This was in order for the vessel to escape detection. Now it worked, and the actual Carmania, disguised as the Trafalgar, sank a German ship. Now this ship was the actual legit real-life SMS Captain Trafalgar, which the Germans had decided to disguise as the RMS Carmania. What? Maybe wind that back and listen again if you don't get it, because it's taken me like 10 times to understand. This is a freakish coincidence. Anyway, the sinking of the German ship was a huge setback for the German war effort and impacted the way that they moved forward. 51 Germans were killed and 279 captured. Who knows what they could have achieved in the war had they not been on board. Coming into number 8, Seth MacFarlane and Mark Wahlberg missed their flight on 9/11. Family Guy and American Dad creator Seth MacFarlane and actor and former rapper Mark Wahlberg were both supposed to be on planes involved in the 9/11 attack. Both men were scheduled to be on American Airlines Flight 11, which is absolutely insane. Now coincidentally, MacFarlane's travel agent told him the wrong time for the flight and he was late. He missed the plane. Now this plane would have ended up being flown into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. Wahlberg made a last-minute decision to fly to Toronto for the film festival instead. If they had died that day, the world would have had no American Dad, The Cleveland Show, or any Wahlberg movies, including Ted, on which the pair collaborated together, and of course no Wahlburgers, which is obviously a travesty. Coming into number 7, we have Tamerlane's body and Operation Barbarossa coincidence. Tamerlane was a Turco-Mongol conqueror and the founder of the Timurid Empire. He lived between 1336 and 1405, but his tomb was opened and his body exhumed by the Soviets just days before the Nazi troops launched a planned attack. His tomb was said to hold a curse that read, "When I rise from the dead, the world shall tremble. Whomsoever opens my tomb shall unleash an invader more terrible than I." Now 3 days later, Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa, the largest military invasion of all time with heavy losses. This is a really scary coincidence. Barbarossa, of course, was an event that changed the world and also marked the decline in Hitler's stronghold. Coming into number 6, we have the weird events surrounding the sinking of the Titanic. Now the sinking of the Titanic was eerily foreshadowed in Morgan Robertson's The Wreck of the Titan. The story, written in 1898, so 14 years prior to the sinking of the Titanic, depicts scarily similar circumstances. A luxury ship, the Titan, is hailed as unsinkable. It then hits an iceberg on a cold April night and goes down. Sound familiar? Also in the book, the boat is a similar size and length to the Titanic. It travels around the same speed, and drumroll, there were not enough lifeboats for passengers. Is this a weird coincidence, or was Robertson a clairvoyant? Obviously the sinking of the Titanic really did change history for, ever. Coming in at number 5, we have Lewis and Clark almost not making it through their expedition alive. Captain Meriwether Lewis and Lieutenant William Clark crossed the western point of the United States between 1804 and 1806. Their journey and discovery shaped modern America. At one point, the pair were captured by a Native American tribe. Their female guide Sacagawea discerned that the tribe planned to kill or desert them, but it all turned around when she discovered that the leader of the tribe was actually her long-lost brother. Weird. She was stolen by a rival tribe when she was younger, and she only just recognized him then. As a result, the crew were gifted horses and allowed safe passage. What a coincidence. If that hadn't have happened, well, honestly, who knows. Coming in at number 4, we have the savior that was Teddy Roosevelt's thick speech. Theodore Theodore Roosevelt was very nearly killed in 1912 when he campaigned for re-election, but he was saved by a thick speech and a glasses case. In an eerie coincidence, Roosevelt placed the folded up paper and glasses case in his breast pocket, the exact area he was shot by a saloon keeper, John Flaming Schrank. He was saved by the contents of his pocket, and as he was not coughing up blood, he concluded that his lung hadn't been pierced, so he would continue his speech. On stage, he said, "I shall ask you to be as quiet as possible. I don't know whether you fully understand that I've just been shot, but it takes more than that to kill a bull moose." Bull moose. Good. Coming into number 3, we have the eerily weird circumstances surrounding the assassinations of President Lincoln and President Kennedy. So the assassinations of Abraham Lincoln and John F. Kennedy have some very strikingly similar circumstances. Lincoln was the first president to be shot and Kennedy the last. The pair were both killed on a Friday before a big public holiday. They both sat beside their wives who weren't injured. Both were succeeded by a vice president named Johnson. Andrew was born in 1808 and Lyndon in 1908. Both had 2 daughters. At both assassinations, the presidents were with another couple, the male of which were wounded. Lincoln's assassin shot him at a theatre and then fled to a warehouse, whereas Kennedy's killer fired at a warehouse then fled to a theatre. Both assassins were then killed by shooters with a cult rival. Just so many weird things. Obviously both assassinations changed history forever, and who knows what was going on there. Coming into number 2, we have the 3 cigars that created America. Having grown up in the United Kingdom, I wasn't taught a lot of the finer detail about the American Civil War, so I literally just learned about this insane, world-altering coincidence while researching for this video, and I'm pretty shook. Basically, in 1862, Confederate Commander Robert E. Lee drafted a war plan called Special Order 191. Now this outlined the movements of the Confederate Brigade over the next few months. This was every Confederate brigade. He gave copies of these orders to his trusted generals, including the somewhat lazy Stonewall Jackson. Jackson then gave some copies of these to his commanders, even though he probably shouldn't have, because they probably didn't have the authority to have those plans themselves. One of his commanders in turn, Daniel Harvey Hill, totally discarded his. He wrapped them around 3 cigars and then left them at a campsite when his brigade moved on. Days later, Union scout Barton W. Mitchell found the cigars. As he was about to smoke them, he looked at the wrapping and thought that they looked actually pretty important. It was. The wrapping then ended up in the hands of General George McClellan, who recognized Robert Lee's handwriting. With the plans, the Unions were able to stage a full offensive at the Battle of Antietam. Now this was a tipping point in the Civil War that gave the North the upper hand. Finally, coming into number 1, we have a truly crazy coincidence. This one turn of a corner changed the world forever. That's right, we have Franz Ferdinand getting shot. The spark that ignited World War I was a total coincidence. Scary really how the peace of Europe hung in the balance with such fragility. Basically what happened here was that Austro-Hungarian leader Archduke Franz Ferdinand escaped an initial assassination attempt while he was in Sarajevo. A bomb was thrown under his motorcade by the Serbian Black Hand Gang. Luckily, or so he thought, Ferdinand survived, but in some final destination-style turn of events, the initial assailant, Gravillo Princip, happened to be in a cafe where the Archduke's motorcade drove by again. This time, his car stalled and gave him enough time to shoot him and his wife. This was the straw that broke the camel's back in terms of the ignition of World War I, and what a scary coincidence, and this really did change the world forever.